All right. Now y'all ready to hear the sermon for tonight? All right. We're going to be, I think we'll be brief tonight. If you have your Bibles, let's go real briefly to the 33rd chapter of the book of Job. All right, the 33rd chapter of the book of Job. Well, it's been a while since we have, but we're going to talk about dreams just briefly tonight. We're going to get back on that and just share a few things with you. All right, the 33rd chapter of the book of Job. And we're going to start reading at verse 13. It reads, "Why dost thou strive against him? For he giveth not account of any of his matters." Let's talk. Now this is the young man, Elihu, talking to Job after his three friends have finished talking with him. Look at what he says there, verse 13. "Why dost thou strive against him?" In other words, God. "For he giveth not account of any of his matters." Verse 14. "For God speaketh once, yet twice, yet man perceiveth it not." Then he's about to tell us how he speaks. Verse 15, "In a dream, in a vision of the night, when deep sleep falleth upon men, and slumberings upon the bed, then he openeth the ears of men, and sealeth their instruction, that he may withdraw man from his purpose, and hide pride from man. He keepeth back his soul from the pit, and his life from perishing by the sword." So, we learned several things in those few scriptures there that we just read. One of the first things we notice is that God speaketh, and he can speak once and twice, and yet we won't perceive it, that God is speaking to us. This Bible says that God speaketh once, yet twice, and man perceiveth it not. Now I'm going to tell you why we have a hard time perceiving it. One, most people dream. Most people dream. And so what happens is we have all of these dreams, especially when we are anxious and things like that. And if we're not careful, when God gives us a dream, we'll just think it's another dream. And that's one of the reasons why we don't perceive it now. Now let's go ahead and keep reading here. Verse 15, "In a dream, in a vision of the night, when deep sleep falleth upon men, and slumberings upon the bed, then he openeth the ears of men, and sealeth their instruction, that he may withdraw man from his purpose, and hide pride from man." Now, I think one of the most important things we can read and point out in this lesson is part of the reason why God gives us dreams. You see that? What does it say there in verse 17? "That God may withdraw man from his purpose." You see that? That God may withdraw man from his purpose. Let's keep reading. "And hide pride from man. He keepeth back his soul from the pit, and his life from perishing by the sword." Now, when you think about dreams, if you would think about it like it's a maze, like you're living in a life in a maze. You're living your life in a maze. Now, anybody that's being led by the Spirit of God, whether you know it or not, you should know it, you are living in a maze. Now, that means most time at the beginning of life, people start down a road and you have all these doorways open to you, and you can make whatever choice you want to make to go through all these doorways. Again, when I was a teenager, I wanted to be a lawyer. And that door was open for me. I could have been one. But God pulled me out of that door He showed me what he wanted me to be. You see that? And so this says that part of the reason why God gives us dreams is to withdraw us from our own purpose. In other words, what you have in your mind, you're supposed to be doing, God will show you what he wants you to do, what he put you on this earth to do. This earth, this world is full of people that's living their own purpose and are unhappy. They think within themselves, if I could just do this, if I can just go to school, if I can just get a college degree, if I can just get married, if I can marry this type of woman or this type of man, if we can just have this type of house, I'll be the happiest person. Happiness only comes with doing what God put you on this earth to do. Now, that's really the bottom line. There's no way around it. If you're not doing what God has called you to do, you're a miserable somebody. Now, you may try to fake it with all your little vacations 2 or 3 times a year. But when you get done with all of that, you got to come back to reality and to that same old empty life you were living 2 weeks ago. That's part of the reason why people take vacations. Not anything against them, but think about it. When you have to vacation to get away from your miserable life, it's because your life is miserable. Now, I'm going to tell you something. There is no misery when you're in God's will. None. And you better know it. So, God gives us dreams to pull us away from our purpose. This Bible says to keep our souls from going into the pit. In other words, that's where our purpose will lead us, away from God. Now, let's think about something. Before we get saved, when we're born with our own will. We are born walking in the wrong direction. And you're not walking in the right direction until you've surrendered yourself to the Lord. And I'm not talking about this area and that area. I'm talking about completely surrendered to the Lord. And most people have not completely surrendered to the Lord. Most people haven't. And what do you mean? Well, you may say, well, I'm going to go to church. I depend on him for my salvation. I'm going to go to church. And I'm going to pray and I'm going to ask the Lord, this or that. But have you prayed and asked the Lord where he wants you to work? What kind of vehicle he wants you to drive? Whether or not you're supposed to pay notes on this and that? Or are you just doing that all on your own because that's what flesh wants? A surrendered life to God is a peaceful life. And it don't mean the devil don't come against you. But I'm telling you, there is peace when you know you are in the will of God because you understand that's where safety is. You see that? And so God spends his time pulling man out of their own purpose to get them into his purpose. And let's think about this. If any of us have ever seen a maze or stood on top of one or have seen one, you may know how to get from this point to that point because you're standing on top of it. But whatever mouse, rat, or whatever you got in there, they don't know. And so if we're living this life in a maze, that means we have to be led by the Spirit of God if we're going to get to the place where God wants us to be. God does not and will not show you every single turn you're supposed to make before you even get started. Because then you wouldn't have to walk by faith. And then you'll get to the point where you felt like you didn't need them. So what he does is he'll wait until you get to the door to that place where you need to make a decision. And I'm telling you, now you may think that this is just something that's, hypothetical or something that's, like a parable. But I'm telling you, it's really like that in real life. One Sunday morning, I woke up, and I think I shared this before. I woke up, and the Lord spoke to me, and what it was, I had a dream that I was supposed to go, that I was going somewhere. And the only thing I saw was that I was going to the stop sign. And when I got to the stop sign, I knew that I was waiting on instruction from the Lord. And that's when I woke up. So when I woke up, the Lord spoke to me just like I'm speaking to you. I heard his voice. He said, get up, put your clothes on, get your Bible, and go. Didn't tell me where I was going. So that's what I did. I told my wife, I said, I'm going to be leaving. I don't know when I'm getting back. The Lord just told me to get up and go. So I'm going to go. I know the first place I'm going is down to the end of the street to the stop sign there. And so that's what I did. So when I got to the stop sign, he told me to make a left. When I got to the next stop sign, he told me to make a right. And I was probably about 10 or 15 miles away from here before I got to my destination. All just following the Lord. Every time I got somewhere where I needed to stop, you know, and make a turn, he would tell me what turn to make. You see that? So we're talking about something that's very practical. That's the way it is in life. There are a whole lot of people paying back school loans because God never told them to go to school to begin with. We'll say, well, that's the American dream. Well, what is God's dream? That's your dream. Now, again, we're not against education. You know, God, I'm going to tell you this. Sometimes God will allow us to go get education. It'll help us in whatever area, you know, of expertise we're wanting to advance in and things like that. But I'm telling you, take it from me. Sometimes you can be getting an education in the wrong direction. Does everybody understand what I'm saying? I can't tell you the number of professionals whose offices I sat in had 3 or 4 degrees on their wall. One of them had nothing to do with the other ones. In other words, they thought they wanted to do accounting. I don't like that, so I'm going to try this. Okay, I did that. I don't like that, so I'm going to try this. Paying for 3 and 4 master's degrees. And 9 times out of 10, that's not even what they're doing when I'm sitting in front of them. Why? Because people have their own purpose. You see that? People spend their whole lives trying to find what they want to do instead of asking God, you see, what they're supposed to do. And so here, this tells us, verse 17, that he may withdraw man from his purpose and hide pride from man. He keepeth back his soul from the pit and his life from perishing by the sword. In other words, God will give us dreams to warn us. To warn us. Our own decision making is designed to take us to hell when we're not following God. It's designed to take us there when we're not following God. How many of us can ever think about any decisions that we've made that maybe we're still paying for now because we refuse to inquire of the Lord about it? You know, in this Bible, before kings went to war, they inquired of a prophet of the Lord about it. And you may say, well, we don't live in those days. I was just telling somebody that the other day, and they said, well, Brother Bolden, we don't live in those days. I said, well, we need to. And God hasn't changed. You know what idolatry is? Is you acting like there's no God. And when you do that, it's because you've made yourself a God. When you can make a decision without inquiring of the Lord about it, you have become your own God. And I'm talking about in every area of our lives. God woke me up to that years ago. I had a vehicle that I was working on, and I was trying to get a screw off, and I had spent a whole week. Now, I'm not dumb by any means. Not slow by any means. I believe I know how to take a screw off. But that week, I couldn't get it off. So I thought to myself, I'm going to have to sell this truck. I can't drive it like this. I need to get this screw off to change this caliper. And so I said, you know, I'm going to try it one more day. Because I got tired. I was out there for hours in the hot sun trying to take one screw off. And I'm telling you, ain't nothing like just needing to take one screw off so that you could fix whatever it is you need to fix. So for a whole week, I'm out there in that hot sun for hours with a newborn baby on side of me, trying to take that screw off. And so when at the end of the day, I said, that's it. I quit. I'm not I can't do this anymore. And the Lord spoke to me just as clear as day and said, you've been turning that screw the wrong way. Now, normally, we know if we have any kind of mechanical sense, you turn the screw counterclockwise if you want to take it off. But for some reason, this screw was supposed to be turned clockwise. And it never dawned on me. You couldn't have told me to turn the screw clockwise to take it off. It never would have came to me. And I honestly believe the Lord kept that from me to teach me a lesson. And so when I said I give up, that's when the Lord said, okay, now I can step in and I can tell you, you've been turning that screw the wrong way. But he didn't stop with that. He said, now you see, I care about every detail of your life. Now I'm going to tell you what that taught me. What did it matter to God for me to take that screw off? Did God just have it in for that screw? No, it didn't. But what it was, I was his servant. And if it mattered to me, it mattered to him. See, that's what love is. And so that's what took place, you see. That's what took place. And so he told me, you see, I care about every detail of your life. And you should have saw me after that. I took off running. I didn't even take the screw off. Right then, I took off running through that whole block, just praising God about that, what he had just spoke to me. And so from that point to this, from that day to this one, I've always had the mindset, if God thought enough of me and cared enough about that one little detail of me taking a screw off, how much will he care about me and what I drive, and where I live, where I work, who I marry? He will care about all of those details. He could have just told me, look, just go down there, ask the mechanic. But he didn't. He gave me instruction on how to do it, and I did it. You see that? And that's the way we have to live as believers, that God instructs us. Now, it's up to us whether we receive it. You see that? It's up to us whether we receive it. So now, let's go real briefly to the 20th chapter of the book of Genesis. The 20th chapter of the book of Genesis. We're going to start reading at verse 1. Now let me ask you all this. By a show of hands, how many of us have ever had a dream from the Lord? All right. 20th chapter of the book of Genesis. We're going to start reading at verse 1. It says, and Abraham journeyed from thence toward the south country, and dwelled between Kadesh and Shur, and sojourned in Gerar. And Abraham said of Sarah his wife, she is my sister. And Abimelech, king of Gerar, sent and took Sarah. But God came to Abimelech, how? Now I want you to notice what it's saying there. God came to Abimelech. How did he come? Now let me make this clear. Just because it's a dream don't mean that it's not real. This Bible says that God came to him in a dream. Now, most people would have a problem with that. In their minds, they feel like if God's not coming down and shaking the whole building when he comes, then I really didn't have a visitation. But listen, whatever God say, whether you dreaming or not, you better take heed to it. It doesn't matter how he comes. If he shows up, take heed to it. All right, let's go ahead and keep reading. Verse 3. But God came to Abimelech in a dream by night, and said to him, behold, thou art but a dead man, for the woman which thou hast taken, for she is a man's wife. Everybody see that? Let's go ahead and keep reading. Verse 4. But Abimelech had not come near her, and he said, Lord, wilt thou slay also a righteous man? So you see Abimelech's talking back to God. in a dream? He didn't say, Lord, that ain't you. This is just a dream. Now, if it's really you, when I wake up, do this. Or speak to me like you spoke to prophet so-and-so. He was just as much God in that dream as he is out of the dream. And look at what he said. He told Abimelech, you are but a dead man. Now, I'm going to tell you something about God. A lot of times, he start off with where it's going. He didn't tell him, look, if you marry her, it's not going to work out, because I've already told Abraham that, you know, that's his wife and that she's going to bear a child for him. So it's going to work out for 20 years. Y'all going to have a good life. You know, y'all going to go on vacations and y'all going to have a nice house and stuff like that. But, you know, eventually you're going to die, and then she's going to go on back to Abraham. He just came right out and told them the end result. You are a dead man. And then told him why. Because the woman that you plan on marrying, she's a married woman. She's already married. Let's go and keep reading. Verse 5, he says, said he not unto me, she is my sister? And she herself said, he is my brother. In the integrity of my heart and the innocency of my hands have I done this. Verse 6, and God said unto him in a dream, yeah, I know that thou didst this in the integrity of thy heart, for I also withheld thee from sinning against me. Therefore suffered I thee not to touch her. Now therefore restore the man his wife, for he is a prophet, and he shall pray for thee, and thou shalt live. And if thou restore her not, know thou that thou shalt surely die, thou and all that are thine. And so here it is, God is stepping out in this dream, letting Abimelech know what's going to take place and letting him know why it's going to take place. He's warning him, you're a dead man. I'm going to kill you. And then he lets him know how to get out of it. Restore that man his wife back. And then he goes on to tell him what to do after the fact. Get him to pray for you, you see, when you keep reading this. Now, if it had been most of us, we'd have thought, the Lord, I know that that's a demon from hell, because the Lord have spoke to me and said, this is my wife. And when we take on that kind of mindset, the Lord will allow you to just keep on going. And you'll find out the hard way you should have listened when he spoke to you in a dream. Or however it was he chose to speak to you. You see that? And so this man responds, Abimelech responds with, out of the integrity of my heart I've done this. In other words, I didn't know that. I wouldn't have done it had I known it. And then the Lord comes back with, yeah, I know you wouldn't have. That's why I kept you from doing it. Now let me tell you something. God, you'll hardly ever get God to speak to a hard head. You got your mind made up about something, God's not going to hardly waste his breath about it. In fact, the Bible makes it clear. When you want to live the way you want to live and don't want to inquire of the Lord, the Bible says he will send you a delusional spirit to help you to believe that lie that you're following. And you can read more about that, of course, when in the book of Numbers, when you're talking about the prophet Balaam. God had already spoke to him, told him don't go with those people, and he kept coming back and praying about it. Listen, take it from me. When God say no the first time, he meant that. You keep going back, he's going to tell you what you want to hear. And then you'll have a testimony later on about why you shouldn't have done it. God warns his people through dreams. And we have to take heed to those things and not think, oh, it's just a dream. I'm going to tell you something. How many of us, you have a dream and you feel like you were in it living it? And then you have other dreams where it's just very, very light. Like, it's almost like you're not even there, but you know what you saw. You know those dreams are just as much from God as the dream that you were running in, sweating in, and wake up sweating. In other words, we can't judge a dream by how we feel every time we come out of it. God will give you something very, very light, but it's just as much from Him as any other dream that you've had from Him. Either way, God is warning us, and God will warn you through dreams. Your job is to take heed to those things. You see that? I always say, if God loved you enough to show you something in a dream, you ought to love Him enough to take heed. Now, I'm telling you, don't take it lightly. A lot of times, I see things before they happen all the time. And it's one of those things, it's like the Lord had to prepare me to be able to deal with the things that I deal with. Because it's not, I want you to think about something, and it's hard for some people to fathom. But I want you to think about something. How would you live? And how would you feel if you knew a lot of things before they would take place? If you understood that people that are shaking your hand, God have already showed you months ago that's really your enemy. Could you still love that person knowing what's on the inside of them? You see, it's not an easy thing, but that's where faith comes in at. You see, that's where faith comes in at. And I'm telling you, I can't tell you the number of times the Lord have shown me something, and I would think, no, that can't be. Surely not. But it is. And I find out that it is. You see that? You'd be surprised some of the things that people have in their hearts. And I'm telling you, to the folks that's sitting right here, some of you wouldn't show up here. But it's just one of those things where the Lord is merciful. Everybody understand where I'm going with that? The Lord knew Judas was going to betray Him when He chose him. And I'm going to tell you, I think that's why it's very important that we be transparent with one another. Because one thing for sure, we can't hide it from God anyway. Well, we can't hide it from Him. And 9 times out of 10, He's going to show His servants as well. You see that? He's going to show His servants as well. And so we have to, it's not an easy life. And I'm telling you, especially, some of us, we've prayed and asked the Lord, I want to have dreams like that. I want you to show me things. But there are a lot of things that come with that as well. Number one, when you know about it, you're responsible for what you know. You're responsible for it. So if God's showing you something, it's because there's something He wants you to do about it. Or some kind of way. Everybody understand? If God shows you something about somebody, and He don't tell you to go to that person, it could be that He wants you to pray for them. But I'm telling you, if God has shown you, it's not just because He wants to entertain you. He wants you to do something with it. This Bible tells us in the book of Jeremiah, if a prophet dream a dream, let him tell a dream. There's responsibility with what we're supposed to do with what God has given us. I'll even go as far as to say this concerning praying for people, especially when God has revealed something to us about them. God was angry with the prophets in Ezekiel's day. He said because none of them made up the gap. In other words, stood in the gap or made up the hedge. What he meant was he was showing his prophets the condition that the Israelites were in, but they were not praying for them. Talking about the prophets, were not praying for the Israelites in their condition. So that goes to show me that when God shows us something, there's something that He wants us to do about whatever it is that He's shown us. And here we see Abimelech in the 20th chapter of the book of Genesis. What did he do? God told him, you're a dead man. Told him why he was going to die. and then told him how he can get out of it. Restore the man, his wife. In other words, so when he woke up from that, he had a decision to make. I could either obey it or I could reject it. And Abimelech, by the grace of God, if you keep reading this, he obeyed it. He restored Abraham back his wife. Now, you may ask, well, what was the problem? What was going to be the issue? It was Abraham's idea. Now, some of people will say Abraham lied. Abraham didn't lie. If you keep reading the story, you'll see she was Abraham's biological sister. She was his sister. And it was Abraham's idea. You know, because the Bible makes it clear that Sarah was a pretty woman, and Abraham thought, these people will kill me over Sarah. And so every country that they went in, if you continue to read that, every country that they went in, Abraham, that was what they did. They played like they weren't married, because Abraham didn't want to be killed over her. So Abimelech had a decision to make. Give this man back his wife or die because of my stubbornness. Now, I'm telling you, when God gives you a dream, you have a decision to make. First thing is determine whether it's God or not. And when you determine that it's God, then you need to ask God, what does he want you to do with what he's shown you? I share this dream, then I'll close. Some years ago, I had a dream that I was supposed to go pray for somebody. And I had a dream. I was in this woman's house. Actually, I knocked on the door, and she opened the door, and she invited me in. I said, so how you doing, Mrs. Brown? That was her name, or what I called her, Mrs. Brown. I said, how you doing, Mrs. Brown? She said, I'm okay. I said, how's your husband doing? She said, oh, he's not doing too well. She said, but if you go pray for him, he'll live. She said he was in the hospital. So I woke up from that dream, and I didn't think much about it, because somebody had told me years before that Mr. Brown had died. So I had no reason to think about going to pray for him in anybody's hospital. And so the following week, within the next week, I found out that Mr. Brown had just died. And it was because I didn't obey that dream. The Lord was showing me to go pray for him. But I want you to think about that. Somebody done told you years ago somebody died. You know, folks just don't walk around lying like that. You just assume if somebody said they're gone, they're gone. And that right there showed me to believe what God showed me over what somebody else have told me. You see that? And so I didn't do what I was supposed to do. I should have at least investigated. If I would have investigated, I would have found out that the man was still alive in a hospital there in Mississippi. And I would have went and prayed for him, and the Lord would have raised him up. So you see, I'm telling you, people die every day because folks aren't taking heed to dreams. You see? And so God wants us to give heed to what he's shown us. If he's showing us, there's a reason for it. Amen.